I want to welcome everybody to our program today, An Evening with Author Deb Rogers. I'm Becky. I'm a librarian with Hillsborough County Public Library, and I'm joined here by my fellow staff member, Vivian. We are here with our presenter, Deb Rogers, who is a Florida-based author. I'm going to hand things over to Deb now to get started, and I'm going to turn off my camera so we can focus on her.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I am a lifelong reader and big fan of libraries, starting with my first love, the bookmobile that came to visit me in rural Illinois. It was the highlight of my third grade year every week that happened, and I've been a big fan of libraries ever since. So thank you so much for inviting me into yours, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my first book and answer any questions that you might have either about the book or about my publishing journey, because I know that that might be interesting to others of you who are interested in becoming writers and representing Florida literature through your own publishing journey. So my book is Florida Woman. It's my debut novel. It came out last summer, and it's going to come out in paperback in May, which I'm super lucky to be able to share just in time for pool season. And, you know, writing a novel is a lot about getting to go deep into your obsessions. So for me, writing Florida Woman was definitely about sharing some of my obsessions with readers, including my obsession with Florida and with Floridians and what it means to live here, what it means to make community here, and what it means to sort of be looked upon by the rest of the country or the rest of the world as Florida people or Florida man or Florida woman. And a lot of that is because of our very iconic mythology that we share through tourism and through just being as epic as we are. Some of it is because we have, you know, a history of lawlessness and criminality that is broadly shared through our open sunshine laws. So where there might be just as many criminals and just as wacky of criminals in Nebraska, they don't have the same openness or the same appeal that headlines featuring us have. So we sort of have this really weird sense of who we are in the public eye that just fascinates me, especially the way the internet has taken on sharing that virally through social media, sharing mugshots and sharing stories, which I think sometimes are a little more odd because of our reptile friends, because of the way we live outside and out loud a bit more than others do, maybe because of the beautiful weather and our beaches, and maybe what happens when you are a little sun-baked. So certainly other factors go into that, like socioeconomics and addictions and all those sort of issues. So I've always been a little bit obsessed with that, especially being on the internet. And I love Florida. I've moved here from the Midwest, never looked back, have lived throughout the state. I've lived in Tallahassee, I've lived rurally, I've worked throughout the state on policy issues and the victims, victims crimes policy work and education policy work. So I've traveled a lot. I've definitely traveled to Hillsborough County, traveled to the Keys, tried to help improve rape crisis programming and other policy issues throughout the state. So I've really been able to dig deep into some of the things that make up Florida and some of the reason it works to reinvent yourself here in Florida and some of the ways that it doesn't. I live in St. Augustine now, so if you're ever come to this coast, come and visit me here. I hope you have. I love St. Augustine. It's gorgeous and haunted and a really fun place to work as a creative person. So all those obsessions sort of come together, and my life led to me writing this particular novel. I've also always been very obsessed with group dynamics, especially small group dynamics, and how does that similar or different than small animal behavior? Because I've also definitely obsessed with Florida's various animal populations, including the wild monkey situation that we have, where they're flourishing in troops in different parts of the state for different reasons. You know, the Ocala monkeys were sort of an accidental displacement, part of one of the old tourist attractions, where they were brought down by a glass bottom boat operator in the Silver Springs area who thought they were cool. They definitely are cool. And I put them on an island thinking they would create a really wonderful tourist attraction, forgetting that monkeys can swim off of islands, and did in fact escape that monkey island, and have set up some troops throughout the region, for better or for worse. So those definitely, Florida's old tourism is a rich, iconic piece of our heritage that still is a part of many people's lives today. So I think those are some of the obsessions that have just always interested me, or that I've read about or experienced, as well as my own experiences living or working with small groups, or even well-intentioned ones like nonprofits can create a family-like or even cult-like atmosphere where there's a lot of hidden rules and a lot of expectations that aren't necessarily spoken, or that are compelled of people. And so those ideas have always been obsessions of mine. So in writing a novel, I think that stuff is all rich territory that we're fascinated by, and then either a story or characters arrive to bring it all to life, and move all of those little threads forward and maybe make a tapestry out of them. Definitely in creating Atlas, which is the community that I write about in Florida Woman, um, and the characters that I chose to populate it, eventually they took over. I forgot all of those little obsessions and trends and things that I was hoping to write about. And I just started telling their story, or rather, they made me tell their story. And the result ends up being the novel. So, Florida Woman is centered on a wildlife refuge in Central Florida, where someone is trying to figure out a way to keep her property from developers by having a refuge for wildlife, specifically the wild macaques that either are trafficked through our state. We're also, a highly um, desirable state for exotic ownership or trafficking or breeding, because animals can be outside. Most animals can be outside year round, and in enclosures, and we also offer good refuges for those animals, which sometimes are very needed. And we have a lot of ethical questions around how do we do that responsibly. Um, in this case, focusing on those macaques gave me a small group community that's trying to figure out how to keep their land from developers by creating this enterprise, but they're very cash poor. And they're also pretty obsessed with creating their own mythology and their own rules and their own cult-like atmosphere of where they're somewhat worshiping the monkeys, somewhat creating other avenues of income, most of which are illegal. These are all mysteries that are in the atmosphere of the book that the main character, Jamie, is immersed in, is hidden from her, and she has to figure out as she goes what is really going on at Atlas. Jamie ends up in this atmosphere because it's her shot at redemption. She went viral for committing a Florida woman type crime, and is given this shot at a work program for the summer, not knowing she's getting into hotter water because the place has a lot going on that she has to figure out. So in order to let that story be told, those characters came forward. Some of them represent Floridians who've been in the region for decades, or generations, I should say, and have attachments in that way. Some who represent those who have come to start over in Florida, which, as we know, describes a lot of us and is a very complicated, wonderful thing where you can recreate yourself in Florida, um, with or without your family. Often it's a place of refuge for people for that reason. Um, I worked with the runaways in Daytona Beach for a while, and learned a lot about that. And that has those issues definitely are in the background of Jamie, the main character. Um, and in some ways, settling into Atlas, this strange and fascinating place that Jamie is drawn to. She really wants to fit in and she wants to do good work and she sees it actually as a place that she might come to belong, although she's vulnerable to that and may not be taken advantage because of those interests and because of the love bombing that she receives when she arrives. It sort of is like one of the wild animals that is settled, and um, the atlas is very good at figuring out how to calm a wild animal or a newcomer into their midst. So wild things happen in the book. Is the book has some dark humor and some crazy Florida type stories tucked within. While it also takes a look at some of those issues that I talked about and how it affects our personal connection with others, our knowledge of ourselves, and what we want to do and be in the world. So that sort of is a look at how Florida Woman is shaped as a novel and how I hope to share it with readers. And I've been really fortunate to hear from readers who, um, one, found that it either resonates with a part of them that has sought connection either with small groups or with animals or in their personal journey of recreation and reinvention, what sort of how that has happened for them. People who have an interest in Florida or representing Florida, and people who are just interested in unusual stories. And I think that's one of the things that was super lucky for me in getting my story published, because I am, launching a writing career after 50 as someone who hasn't been working in literature, who doesn't have an MFA, who had no connections, kind of a unicorn situation for that to happen. I got my agent in the midst of the pandemic when publishing was super uncertain. It takes a long time to get a book out, which I'm sure you know. Um, but super, super lucky. But it's also a great testimony for those of you who might be considering writing, because I was welcomed into the publishing Big Five with my story. They were looking for stories that weren't your typical Brooklyn love story or, angsty 20 something MFA type writer. I think that there's a lot of that out there, and that's fantastic, but they're also hungry for other stories, and we might have those stories for them. I was lucky to find an agent who got my story and really wanted to share it, and who shares a love of Florida. And she found me an editor at HarperCollins who's from North Carolina and doesn't mind reading about snakes and alligators and crazy women. In fact, really took the story into her heart and helped me represent it to the fullest. So it took I think about 2 years start to finish from in order securing an agent and doing a revision process after that with her, from her guidance to present it at its best light, and then for HarperCollins to schedule it and pull it forward that last year, my debut year. And like I said, I'm going to be able to share it in paperback format, which is huge, in May. And I'm really excited to once again have another summer journey with the book. And paperbacks are more accessible, and I'm really happy about that. There's also a great audio version that HarperCollins made, so lucky and grateful for that, which people have been able to get through Libby or wherever you get your audiobooks. So that's sort of the journey the book is taking and is on, and I know that it's it's a daunting process for your first book, but if anyone is in a similar situation, I'd be happy to answer questions or provide resource, because I want lots of Florida stories out there. And I'm grateful for Florida readers. And our libraries are a tremendous asset to us. We were just talking before the show about how libraries are there when you need power or when you need a story, and everything in between. So I'm so happy to be a part of Florida's community of libraries and community of readers. Um, that's sort of a roundup look at my little baby, Florida woman. And I imagine there are some Florida women or Florida men who have some questions I'd be happy to take or or go in a different direction. There you are.
Thank you. Sorry. That was great. That was a great overview, and I appreciate that. Let me go and share my screen real fast so we can, before we get to the questions, if anybody hasn't submitted questions yet, you still have a little bit of time.
There's Libby.
Uh,
I love Libby. I love that Libby logo.
exactly. So yeah, so if anybody hasn't read Florida Woman yet, you can go ahead and get the ebook through Libby and to read, or if you're interested in listening to that audiobook, which actually I listened to the audiobook and it was fantastic. It was the person who's the narrator did a great job. So you can get that through Hoopla, and with Hoopla, there's never any wait. And you can go and check out our ebook and our electronic audiobooks at 8cplc.org/ebooks. And physical copies are also available at the library. I have my physical copy from the library here, just as an example.
It's such a thrill. I mean, y'all know, just it's such a thrill to think of a library. When I first saw a book with a little library decimal tag on the outside, I lost it, because libraries are my safe spot. And to think of my book in the hands of a librarian, that's just
Hmm.
amazing. Thank
It's
you.
pretty, yeah, it's pretty. I love watching authors see their books like out in the wild. Just like, look, it's there.
Out in the wild.
Perfect. All right, so let's get to those questions. All right, Vivian, on to you.
All right, so we have a few questions that came in. So one of the questions was, how long have you been writing, or when did you start to write?
Well, I started in 5th grade. I've always wanted to be a writer, but I haven't had the kind of life that led to an ease with academia, or I'm grateful to be the first of my family to go to college, and I have a bachelor's degree, but I had to start working immediately, or all through my education, and never ever went back for a master's. Had kids kind of early. Had domestic violence situation, a number of things that were always disruptive to my finishing big things. So it took me a while to get started. I worked as a blogger a few years ago, when that was became a thing, and pop culture writer, and that kind of got me ready to write something bigger. And then really only started about 5 years ago, being in a position to be serious about finishing something big. Now, some of that is just simply time and life situation. Some of it probably discipline that I just didn't have. And some of it was belief in myself. So I think that I really learned a big lesson, that I should have started believing in myself sooner. But it's okay, because this is the journey I'm on, and now I'm able to claim that and continue writing forward. But I would really encourage anyone to start believing in themselves yesterday, because I had put up a lot of barriers to myself, saying, well, I'm not connected, or I'm not this, so what's the point? But the point is the work itself, and what it helps you grow in and of yourself. And after that, you might actually find readers. You might actually find a way into sharing that. So that's sort of the journey I took, and I just wish I had started sooner. It did take me about 3 to 4 years to write the book itself, and rewrite it and rewrite it. And I should have rewritten it one more time, but I did it. I did that. My agent helped me do that part.
I think that kind of ties into the other question that came in, which was, what advice would you give to a writer working on their first book?
Yeah, just try not to censor yourself. Try not to stop midway. What the other folks that I support, or I'm lucky enough to know, who are also on the writer's path, we're usually are such avid readers that we compare ourselves to our faves, who have been already published and already been highly edited, and already maybe had other resources, and we only see the errors in our work, and we only see the good in theirs. So try not to compare. Try to let the work live, by getting out of your own way. I think that's the only advice that I can give that made sense to me was just go ahead and finish it. Try to finish it, because you can always work with what you have. There are many things I abandoned along the way for different reasons, and if I had just pushed through to finish them, they might be breathing now too. So try to finish it and try to support yourself. I don't know that we can all find the support we need in the world, but try to remind yourself that your work is valid, the time that you want to put into it is valid and needed, and fun. Have fun with it. Allow it to be your fun place.
The last question we had was, what writing project are you currently working on?
I'm finishing my last, I hope, draft before turning in a fun novel that's not a sequel. It's a different, but also serial comic book about Florida, looking at the myth of the Fountain of Youth, which is also rich and wonderful and full of lies and deceit and messiness and people who have been captivated by everything from the Bermuda Triangle to aliens to natives. So I had a lot of fun with it, and I hope it finds a home.
Oh, sounds cool. That sounds really interesting.
That sounds really good, yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely tap my interlibrary loan as well on that.
for sure. All right. And that does it for the questions on our side. On my side, anyway.
So awesome that you guys have wanted to talk with me about the book. I want to talk about what you're seeing out there in the world right now. That's the only thing that's hard about not being in your space. I love Hillsborough County and wonder what's going on for you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. That was great.
Oh, good. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And yeah, if anybody does have any of those follow-up questions for Deb, you can go and reach her at her website, which is debrogersauthor.com, or on Twitter and Instagram at debonTheRocks, or actually you can email her at debrogersfl@gmail.com. And if you have any questions for the library, you can reach us at our website, hcplc.org/contact, or give us a call, 813-273-3652. So there's ways to reach all of us. But thank you again, Deb, for so much for answering those questions. It was great to hear about the research, especially. Vivian said we were curious about that. I was definitely curious about the monkeys because they were so featured in the books. So I could tell there was some good research in there.
True delight. I hope I can see you soon in person. I really appreciate talking to you tonight.
Yeah, hopefully we can have you over in Hillsborough County in the future.
I'll bring a monkey or two. I'll hijack a monkey or two.
Definitely be there.
That will be popular, yeah. Thank you again. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.